Om Tavakatamritam Tapta Jivanam Kaviviriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvignantiye Bhurita Janaha. Thy words of immortality, full of divine glories, are praised by the sages. They are auspicious to hear. They destroy sins and take away the threefold miseries of life. Those, O Lord, who receive and spread thy words are the greatest benefactors. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. His visit to Pandit Vidya Sagar. Page 102. Vidya Sagar says, "Oh, that's a remarkable statement. I have learned something new today." And that's what the whole process of acquiring knowledge is. You must learn something new every day. It keeps everything fresh. He made this statement when Sri Ramakrishna had said that all the scriptures and all the Vedas and all the Puranas and all the Tantras and everything have been defiled by the tongue. It's only one thing that's undefiled, that is Brahman. Okay. So Vidyasagar says, there's an old verse, Uchishtam Sarva Shastranam Sarva Shastra Mukhi Mukhi, that all these things have been defiled. And in Orthodox, you can say, Hinduism, touching anything by the tongue is kind of anathema, like in the sense of it's defiled. So the master now keeps on explaining, and this passage is a very profound passage. Profound because we hear the words of Brahman tossed about here and there. This gives us a correct perspective of what this reality which is spoken of in the Upanishads. And it is only in the Upanishads that this is indicated. Master, a man had two sons. The father sent them to a preceptor, Guru, to learn the knowledge of Brahman. After a few years, they returned from their Guru's house and bowed low before their father. Wanting to measure the depth of their knowledge of Brahman, he questioned the older of the two boys. "My child," he said, "have you studied all the scriptures? Now tell me, what is the nature of Brahman?" The boy began to explain Brahman by reciting various texts from the Vedas, as usual. The father did not say anything. Then he asked a younger son the same question. But the boy remained silent and stood with his eyes cast down. No word escaped his lips. The father was pleased and said to him, "My child, you have understood a little of Brahman. What is cannot be expressed in words." Now, what Brahman is, the Upanishad, like me, like the elder boy, I'm going to quote some of the words, but I'm taking a passage from the Upanishads which speaks really of the reality which is beyond the ken of normal understanding. It's in the Kena Upanishad. The I does not go there, nor speech, nor mind. We do not know, the Guru is declaring, we do not know Brahman to be such and such. Hence, we are not aware of any process of instructing about it. That, because he's saying that Brahman is surely different from the known. And again, it is above the unknown. Such was the utterance we heard from the ancient teachers who explained it to us. This has been a very ancient tradition. This, the teacher itself, is in ancient times, and he says, we have heard it from our teachers. If you think I have known Brahman well enough, then you have known only a very little expression of that in the human body and a little expression of that amongst the gods. Therefore, Brahman is still to be deliberated upon by you. And then the student keeps on meditating. And then after meditating all these things, he says, I do not think I know Brahman well enough. Not that I do not know. I know that I do not know as well. He amongst us who understands this utterance, not that I do not know, I know and I do not know as well, knows that Brahman. Now, is it confused? The play of words. Actually, it's not a play of words. It is something that, as I said, it's indescribable. The very basis, the whole philosophy of Vedanta stands on the revealed scriptures. It's revealing what? Brahman. And says the highest achievement a human can ever have is the knowledge of Brahman. And yet, it can describe adequately. Now, that is something which is to be pondered about, because, as I said, it is beyond speech, it is beyond mind, it is beyond intelligence. So, he keeps on explaining, Sri Ramakrishna. Now, I won't interrupt him. So, let us go. Men often think that they have understood Brahman fully. Once an ant went to a hill of sugar. One grain filled its stomach. Taking another grain in its mouth, it started homeward. On its way, it thought, next time, I shall carry home the whole hill. That is the way shallow minds think. They don't know that Brahman is beyond one's words and thoughts. However great a man may be, how much can he know of Brahman? Shuka, they saying he was the ideal knower of Brahman, they say. And sages like him may have been big ants, but even they could carry at the utmost 8 or 10 grains of sugar. Now, this is profound in the sense of, you see, he is talking to a Pandit who has studied the Vedas and the Puranas and all these things. And hence, he has to speak to that Pandit on that level, because that Pandit's level of understanding is much more superior. And yet, he says that Pandit was still trying to gauge the knowledge called Brahman through his intelligence, trying to understand it. If you can understand a thing, that thing is limited by your intelligence. Always. And that's the first step in making a thing which is unknown, known, by limiting it. You limit it by your intelligence. Whether you own it later, it doesn't matter. But you limit a thing when you try to understand it. Brahman cannot be limited. As I said, it's beyond human intelligence. We use the word Brahman. Some days ago, I was just flipping through pages of a book. Some devotee has printed and given it to me, and all the mantras and this and that, and all the very much. So what do you understand by these? Speaking about Brahman, do you know what this thing is? No, it is written in the scriptures. I say, nothing is written in the scriptures that you feel that you know it. The scriptures only indicate that state. And then I said, do you know how to pronounce the word in this original? So, the original in the Sanskrit is called Brahma. So that person was flabbergasted. I said, this is what happens when people have no even comprehension of the scriptures, and they're trying to explain what waking and dream and deep sleep and this and that, and this is what it is. So Shukadeva, as I said, he was one of the best knowers of Brahman. He's considered one of the best knowers of Brahman. And even he is a big ant, taking about 10 grains of sugar. The whole hill is still there. Continues, as for what has been said in the Vedas and the Puranas, Puranas is a class of literature. It's not pure mythology. Some of the truths of the Vedas were so abstruse and they needed so much rigor, intellectual rigor and a kind of discipline, life, to study it. It wasn't possible for everyone to access this knowledge. So those truths had been brought out in story forms for the general mass of people, so that they could inculcate these ideas and concepts. Puranas literally means that which is ancient. Pura. So he says, do you know, as for what has been said in the Vedas and the Puranas, do you know what it is like? Suppose a man has seen the ocean and someone asks him, well, what is the ocean like? The first man opens his mouth as wide as he can and says, what a sight, what tremendous waves and sounds. The description of Brahman in the sacred books is like that. What loud sound, what waves, and how deep we don't know, but it's like so vast. This is what the scriptures speak about Brahman. It is said in the Vedas that Brahman is of the nature of bliss. Again, it's only indicative. It is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Sat is existence, Chit is consciousness, and Ananda is bliss. Existence, consciousness, bliss. These are the threefold descriptions of Brahman from the positive standpoint. It has to be explained. So he says, the Vedas describe Brahman as bliss, the nature of bliss. People think, Brahman, you know what it is like? One just one grain of that bliss of Brahman has actually enlivened this whole world with bliss. I will say, oh my God, just one. Yes, just a small, very infinitesimal part of that great bliss of Brahman has enlivened. The Vedas, they say, Anandam Brahmeti Vyajanat, know Brahman to be of the nature of bliss. And so, all the bliss that you find in this world, from the lowest to the highest, is just an infinitesimal fraction of that bliss. And the Upanishads say, who can live a moment, who can breathe a moment, if that bliss is not there within the heart of all? This indeed enlivens all beings. So you say, how do you live? By that bliss. And what's the bliss? That's that bliss of Brahman. Just condensed, just a small thing. Ko heva se pranat yadi heva akasha ananda nasyat. It's in the Upanishad called the Taittiriya Upanishad. It's amazing. And then to understand the totality of bliss, I mean, with the infinite bliss. Well, you can understand. So he says, Shuka, that is Shukadev. Last time I had mentioned, Shuka was the son of the great sage Vyasa, who compiled the great Vedas, edited it. Shuka and the other sages stood on the shore of this ocean of Brahman and saw and touched the water. According to one school of thought, they never plunged into it. Those who do so cannot come back to the world again. But what about phenomenal existence? What are you talking of phenomenal existence? You have become the noumenon. You have become the complete. This whole thing appears like a kind of a shadow, a dream. Come back to this world again. Come back to what? That is, you think that you exist and Brahman also has to exist. Well, no. Existence is only one. It cannot be two. Otherwise, one existence will limit the other existence. Your existence will limit the existence of Brahman, which of course is not possible. So Vedanta dismisses that. There, you don't have to bother about this. Just plunge in. Yeah, so these sages just stood on the shore of this ocean of Brahman. Now, how big is the ocean? You can imagine. You go to the Pacific Ocean, you go to the shoreline, you'll understand how big is the ocean. You'll feel so small. And these guys went and just touched that ocean. So these are one of the greatest of sages. So he says, now where do you get this knowledge of Brahman? In samadhi, one attains the knowledge of Brahman. In nirvikalpa samadhi, not ordinary samadhi. In nirvikalpa samadhi, your complete individual existence is wiped out. Only then can you get the knowledge of Brahman. You know, there is a passage in one of the Upanishads called the Brihad Aranyak Upanishad. Very interesting. So there was a sage. Her name was Gargi. She was one of those, you can say, elite sages who had debated the other sages. And she was debating another great sage called Yajnavalkya in the Upanishads. It was held in the court of the king Janaka. And the best Vedic scholars and the best knowers of Brahman had. So she's arguing with him. And then she puts one question, he answers it, and she puts one question and answers. She comes to the very end of her string of questions, making that sage go higher and higher and higher into this reality. And then she asks one question, saying, Gargi, don't ask this question. You are pushing this inquiry too far. Don't ask. And he says, it is you're inquiring about something which is beyond reason. And this question cannot be asked. And if you ask, your head will fall off. Your head will fall off. Don't ask this question. It was an old way of saying, like, this will kill you. Okay. So Gargi stepped back. Then again, she kind of took a different, you can say, direction of inquiry. Again, she keeps on inquiry. And they speak about this great Akshara Brahma, the imperishable Brahman. And after she has questioned him on his knowledge of understanding of Brahman, then she says, nobody can beat Yajnavalkya in this debate. He is the superior knower of Brahman. So in the scriptures also there is something called the ordinary knowers of Brahman. We also have classification. The higher knower of Brahman and the superior knower of Brahman. Brahmavid, the knower of Brahman. Brahmavid Variyan, the superior knower, higher knower of Brahman. And Brahmavid Varishta, the best knowers of Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna was the best knowers of Brahman. So we should understand this, that these things he has spoken from experience. Because once you have this knowledge of Brahman, it's not going to go away. Where do you think it's going to go away? If it goes away, it was not knowledge at all. It was some form of kind of hallucinations or a delusion. It doesn't go away. And that person, when he comes down from that state a little, he speaks about it, indicates that state, not speaks about it. You cannot speak, indicates it. So after all these thousands and thousands of years, you see Sri Ramakrishna reiterating what had been spoken of by the Upanishads. And as I said, it is only in the Upanishads, only in the Vedas, that this knowledge of Brahman has been presented, and it will never be replicated. And it's not only the knowledge has been indicated, the means to it are also indicated. This is what you need to attain to this state. And this knowledge, indicatory knowledge, plus the means, has been protected for thousands and thousands of years by this tradition. It's called the Brahma Vidya Sampradaya, the tradition of the knowledge of Brahman. Yes. In fact, we don't know how many numberless sages protected this knowledge. How do you protect this knowledge? By keeping the books hidden? That's not the way. They never did it that way. They made this knowledge their own. And then they transmitted it. And the books were meant for the kindergarten boys and girls used to come. Kind of give them something to memorize, a rote memory. And what we get is here. So this knowledge of Brahman cannot be found in books. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example. He tells Swami Vivekananda, take that almanac which predicts the rainfall for the year. You open that. How much? Say, now squeeze it. Do you get any rainfall there? No. So these books are something like that. Knowledge is different. Like the rain is different from what is predicted in the almanac. So these books are like almanacs. But yet you have the idea, you have experienced there is something called rain. And these books are speaking about it. So there is a reality called Brahman. And these books are indicating this. Then, so he's saying in samadhi, in nirvikalpa samadhi, nirvikalpa means in that state the mind dies. Because the mind always is fluctuating, because there is a sense of I. In that state you have to meditate on the I. And this I is linked to a cosmic I. It leads you to higher. And then the whole thing has stopped. You, as it were, stop the mind. And when you stop the mind, you get the knowledge of Brahman. You transcend the I. Not this I. The I we know all. One realizes Brahman. In that state, reasoning stops. Exactly. Reasoning in the sense, the discernment between the real and the unreal. This is what is reasoning. I see smoke, and so there must be fire. Something like this. It's not assumption or something like that. It is this, the discernment between the real and the unreal. Saying in that state, reasoning stops altogether and man becomes mute. He has no power to describe the nature of Brahman. Here it is. Because the mind has become still, become mute in the sense silent. That younger boy who stood quietly without speaking, well, he had an inkling. It's a state beyond all speech. It's a state even beyond silence. So do we have to attain it? Yes, you have to attain it. But why? Why should we bother? Because our nature is part of that Brahman. Not part in the sense it's a small part, the whole and the part. Just in the way of trying to explain it. Your real nature is Brahman. So it's not something you need to go from here to the moon or the Mars to attain the knowledge of Brahman. You go to all the places out, you will not get it. You will get it there. As I said, that grain of bliss enlivens the whole world with life. It is that grain of bliss which has given rise to life. It has given rise to mind. It has given rise to bodies. It has given rise to all this thing. So that is Anandeva Khalvimani Bhutani. In everything emerges from that bliss, is sustained in that bliss, and merges in that bliss. So people run for happiness and people get misery. When you know that the bliss is within you, why do you run about? This thing or that person will make me happy. Really? Or no? So that bliss is something which is your real nature. Your real nature. So your real nature is Sat and Chit and Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. But I thought it was the Brahman, the nature of Brahman, which is Satchidananda. If Brahman's nature is Satchidananda, your nature also is. That is important. Because you cannot separate. The idea of separation, this and that, Brahman is beyond this and that, now and then, past and present, that's nothing. It's all wiped out. It's that great oneness. And this oneness is what it's preaching. So It is part of your nature. We are not talking of something which is very distinct, different, far away. It's nothing. We are not. It is here and now. Then Sri Ramakrishna keeps on. Once a salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. All laugh. Everybody knows. It wanted to tell others how deep the water was. But this it could never do. For sooner did it get into the water than it melted. Now, who was there to report the ocean's depth? So what happened to the salt doll? Died? Oh, dead? Oh, poor salt doll. You're playing with dolls? What do you think of the ocean? The doll has become the ocean. The salt had come from the ocean, has gone and become the ocean. The salt doll no longer exists. What remains is the ocean. So what's that? Yes, a lot of people say, no, I don't want to be the ocean. Like Ram Prasad says, oh mother, I don't want to be sugar. I want to taste sugar. Yeah, I don't want to be sugar. Everybody will come and lick me. So a devotee asks, suppose a man has obtained the knowledge of Brahman in samadhi. Doesn't he speak anymore? Then he says, Master says, Shankaracharya, you know Shankaracharya, one of the great knowers of Brahman who wrote about Brahman, he tried to explain Brahman, retained the ego of knowledge in order to teach others. So when your individuality is kind of merged in that great bliss, we do not know how these things again becomes transformed and reappear. It happens like Swami Vivekananda gives a hint. In fact, Swami Vivekananda was something like this, saying, I am like a piece of glass in an ocean of light. So this ego of knowledge is like the piece of glass in an ocean of light. It perfectly filters all the light through it. Yet it has a kind of a semblance of differentiation. Sri Ramakrishna also gives the example. It's like a stick that is thrown in the water. When you look at the water, you'll see the left side and the right side. That ego has like that. The ego of knowledge apparently divides. So it appears. And the theology in the various scriptures is saying that God keeps the ego of knowledge in some people so that these people can teach others. It's not in your individual hand. As it, oh, I want to retain the ego of knowledge. I'll say, that's not your business. I'll take care of it. So after the vision of Brahman, man becomes silent. Yeah. He reasons about it as long as he has not realized it. Yeah. Neti, not this, not this. Brahman is not fine. It's beyond color, it's beyond taste, beyond sense, beyond this. A shabdam, a sparsham, a rupam, a rasam, a gandham, nityam, all of these various things. So all these things are when your intellect is trying to grasp that which is beyond the intellect. You need that intellect. So Swami Vivekananda calls the intellect a street cleaner. It cleans up things. So you need its services. Okay. Imagine if these roads are not clean. You can see what happens. So the intellect clears the path. He reasons about it as long as he not realize it. If you heat butter, Sri Ramakrishna, gives this beautiful illustration. If you heat butter in a pan on the stove, it makes a sizzling sound as long as the water it contains has not dried up. But when no trace of water is left, the clarified butter makes no sound. Ghee does not make it. If you put an uncooked cake of flour in that butter, it sizzles again. But after the cake is cooked, all sounds stop. Just so, a man established in samadhi comes down to the relative plane of consciousness in order to teach others. Then he talks about God. Gives another example. A bee buzzes as long as it is not sitting on a flower. It becomes silent when it begins to sip the honey. But sometimes, intoxicated with the honey, with the nectar, it buzzes again. Again, he gives another example. An empty pitcher makes a gurgling sound when it is dipped in water. When it fills up, it becomes silent or laugh. But if the water is poured from it into another pitcher, then you can hear the sound again, laughter. It says, the rishis of old attained the knowledge of Brahman. One cannot have this as long as there is a slightest trace of worldliness. Yeah. So what is Rishi? Rishi is the sage, but a sage, not an ordinary sage. We call it a sage, wise. No. In the Rishi, the word is translated as sage, but Rishi is one who knows the past, the present, and the future. Of what? Of all things. That sage has broken the rod of time. That is a Rishi. Another meaning of the word Rishi is the seer of mantras, one who has realized, seen these mantras. All the Vedas are the experiences, the perceptions of these rishis who have seen these mantras. They have seen, as it were, the mind of God. And they bring out their experience into mantras. Another meaning of the word Rishi is a poet. So that's why the Vedas are just sheer poetry. Beautiful poetry. And Swami Vivekananda says, every one of us have to become rishis. He's saying he envisaged that rishis will walk down the streets. Rishis will interact with each other. Won't it be a glorious society? We talk about society. What's an ideal society? Rishihood. So this rishihood is also one's own birthright. What are you born for? To be like an animal? No. Your birthright is this rishihood, your Brahmanhood. This is what it is. So that's why every person who is born has a great inheritance, this knowledge which that person will inherit. Yes, that is a great inheritance that we have. No life is useless, no life is stupid, no life is silly. Every life has the potential to become a rishi. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, how hard the rishis labored. I meditated for 2 days, Swami, and I couldn't get anything. And another person says, I meditated for 8 days straight, and I got the knowledge of Brahman. I think I've got a knowledge of Brahman. Why do you ask me? If you got a knowledge of Brahman, it's beyond all doubts. You don't have to ask anybody to authenticate it. So there's a monk had in Belur Mad. He's saying, he comes to Swami Nikhilananda, he's saying, I got it. And then Nikhilananda says, are you sure? There's no doubt? Sure, no doubt. He looks at him, no doubt at all? You see, yeah, there is a slight doubt. And Nikhilananda claps and says, then you didn't have it. How can you have any doubts when you have that knowledge? So he's saying, hardly labor. Early in the morning, they would go away from the hermitage as ashram and would spend the whole day in solitude meditating on Brahman. At night, they would return to the hermitage and eat a little fruit or roots. They kept their minds aloof from the objects of sight, hearing, touch, and other things of a worldly nature. Only thus did they realize Brahman as their own inner consciousness. This is what happened. And this is exactly what the Upanishad says. Pratibodha viditam matam amritatvam hivindate. That Brahman is known as that inner consciousness, one's own inner consciousness. Pratibodha viditam matam. Then what happens? Amritatvam hivindate. One becomes immortal. So, where is that Brahman? You will understand it in your own inner consciousness. Bodhe, prati bodhe. In every act of consciousness, in every act of cognition is this Brahman experienced. So, this is what. You've got to prepare your body. You've got to prepare your senses. You've got to prepare your mind. And you've got to prepare your intellect. And once that is there, Swami Vivekananda says, what can decrepit little weaklings do? They will shatter into pieces when even a slight forces of the body, of that spiritual forces are awakened in it. So this is what it is. These spiritual forces are tremendous. A body has to be ready to absorb that impact. Oh yeah. Otherwise, we can get into samadhi, make a body. And that is the whole practice. You already are that. You just need to make all these instruments that you have perfectly aligned and clean. When you align everything, your body, your senses, and everything all together, align them, then the light filters through. You don't have to, your knowledge of Brahman is not created by your japa and meditation. Sorry. That's what Holy Mother also says. You cannot realize God through japa and meditation. Why are we doing it? We're trying to align all our forces and all our dimensions. That is the work of spiritual practices, nothing more. Because if you're going to produce a knowledge of Brahman, then that's not a knowledge of Brahman. It is always existent. We'll stop here. In the next class, we'll continue this. You see, he is not speaking about the personal God at all. Later on, he will come down. Because the Pandit has understood these things, studied these things. So he's speaking to him for his comprehension. He can grasp this. Time for questions. Okay. Everything is nice and wonderful. Okay. Do we have any questions here?
You said there are different classes of knowers of Brahman, or at least three, what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And you also said that the knowledge of Brahman can be attained only in samadhi or only in nirvikalpa samadhi.
Yeah.
So are there different kinds of nirvikalpa samadhi because there are different kinds of knowers of Brahman?
No. The question is, I spoke about the different classes of knowers of Brahman. So are there different types of nirvikalpa samadhi? No. After the first experience, that sage, what the sage practices is the destruction of the mind as the mind and the destruction of all impressions. It's called vasanakshaya and manonasha. However, let's not get into technicalities because that thing is very technical there. So, the three classes of knowers of Brahmana, Brahmavid, vid is to know. One, the knower of Brahman, Brahmavid, Variyan, the higher knower of Brahman, the better knower of Brahman, and Brahmavid Varishta, one who knows Brahman as a superior, in a superior way. It is a degree of the minds. There are some who will go up and then the minds will come down. There are some who will go down and stay out there for a longer time. And there are some who will go out there and they have to be brought out back. You know, Totapuri had to bring Sri Ramakrishna out of that state. So he saw he had gone into samadhi and he came out quietly, locked the door of that hut in Dakshineshwar. And he sat outside to guard so that nobody disturbs this. Nobody will disturb them, but then people might come and make noise or may shout or something like that. Or come looking out for it. So he sat there for 3 days. And now and then looking, oh, he's still. And then he checked the signs. Now that itself has a different science about it. How to check for signs if that person is in samadhi or no. Oh yeah, it's a detailed science on what signs are there in the body. That man. And he checked everything and he found, oh, this is nirvikalpa. Oh, he said, kya daivi maya, what divine maya. He's saying he's got it so quickly in 3 days. I spent 40 years. Now, Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna's guru himself spent 40 years and he had that great knowledge of Brahman. And his disciple, and then he started repeating the sacred syllables of the Vedas. Om, Hariom, and then slowly Sri Ramakrishna's mind came down. So, like I said, Sri Ramakrishna is the Brahmavid Varishta, the best knower of Brahman. So there are others also there. So it's a degree of the purity of the mind. So that's why in the first classes, when you get into it, you start destroying the mind. It's not that these things will be static. This guy will be low and there's nothing lower. This guy got it, that guy will keep on ascending better. Oh yeah. So, yes. You wanted to ask?
Oh gosh, I had 2 questions and then I just thought they were too complex. I didn't want to hold everyone up. I guess I was just thinking about the term bliss, and I think, you know, in America especially, sometimes I think people equate that word with like ice cream and things that are delicious. And I just wonder a little bit about the root, the origin of that term.
Bliss. The question is, let's know the origin of the word bliss, because people equate bliss with, if you drink, eat ice cream or something like that, blissful. Or you take a kind of a trip and you become so blissful. What happens is, suppose there is a craving for an ice cream, okay, and I've been craving for ice cream for the last couple of days, and then because of my craving I'll get it. The world will bring it to you, don't worry. Somebody will offer it or you buy it and you take that, and then you spoon that ice cream in. As you spoon that ice cream inside, that craving which had made the mind restless is suddenly calmed. And as it is calm for that instant, that bliss which is there innate shines through. That is the experience of that bliss. So, like I said, who will want to get up early in the morning, study or work? Who will live like that? If there was that bliss wasn't there, that bliss kind of percolates in all our activities. So because it's part of our real nature, if we can calm the mind, it flashes. So it's not happiness. Happiness is like you get something and okay, and then again you'll get unhappiness because the mind again has become turbulent. So for that moment, the mind becomes, when I eat the ice cream, it becomes calm. And that. So that's why we say practice meditation, because if you can make the mind calm, the bliss will flash. Okay. Well, no questions, just pranams. Okay, thank you very much. See you again on Friday. We are taking a new, you can say, life called Mathur Babu. We had taken Rani Rashmani, and we thought that Mathur Babu was Rani Rashmani's son-in-law. It will continue the narrative. It will continue time. And we also have Sunday talk. We also have Ram Nam, so on Sunday itself. And we also have on Saturday, we have Karma Yoga. Those who are around can come along and do some Karma Yoga here at the center. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.